Sometimes you like it when a plan comes together, and I'm not talking about fitting the engine in because we're not there yet. But what I wanted to do was pull these bolts out to space the K-member down, and I was trying to figure out what size bolts these are. I think they're M12 by 1.5. So I wanted to space the K-member down, so I loosened up the bolts, figured out what bolt size these were, and I was going to try to figure out something I could do just temporarily to space it out and test it. So just for giggles, I grabbed some old Gen 3 LS head bolts, and these are about 7 inches long. And they're like a M11 by 2, but they drop in and they thread in actually just enough to grab the threads and not come out, and it leaves a 1 3/4 space there. That works out pretty slick. No, my plan is not to use those to mount it that way, but this is just temporary to help kind of keep everything lined up. So I'm going to use this old piece that came with my roll cage. This is a outrigger section that I didn't use, and I didn't use the piece because I was able to split one of them in half and get 2 pieces out of one, so I have an extra piece. So I'll mark and cut 1 3/4 out of this, and then I'll throw it in the car just to space it out. Okay, I did get the spacers in there, 1 3/4. Do have the bolts on the outside, but this is just temporary. When I spaced it down, it actually created a big gap in the front because it was twisting the K-member, so I did end up loosening these arms in the backside just for now. And then I took the sway bar down, so I'll probably be able to space the sway bar and then figure something out there for that spacing. And like I said, the 1.75 inch was just scientifically determined by how much I had on the LS head bolt. So it's a complete guess. I did have to bust loose the steering shaft a little bit. I'll probably really end up having to pull this whole thing out and then free this up or do a different shaft or something because this is all rusted, and I don't know if I'll be able to get it back together very easily unless I take it apart and clean it up. So I did also pick up this 4-pound guy and took a couple swings at it and trimmed a couple of the ears on the transmission. Just kind of smooth these out. Chop this ear off, smooth that one, smooth this guy up on the top. That's only like a 1/16 of an inch, but sometimes that's all you need is a 1/16. So I don't really have a good reference point for before and after there, but you can see it's a little bit more roundy. So I'll throw it back in and see where we end up. Okay, I think I'm finally getting somewhere now with this thing. So I have the engine angle right now at 6.6 degrees. The car I'm estimating is about 2.5 degrees. So I got those measurements by kind of measuring some spots on the hood, and then I put the angle finder in the back on the floor, and I came up with about 2.5 inches that it's tilted back right now from A, not having any weight in it in the front, and B, spacing the front up. So I know when it actually gets some weight, it'll level out a little bit, and then I'll adjust the suspension. The goal is to take that 2.5 inches out of that 6.6, so that when this thing levels out, it'll be at about 4 degrees. The position in relation to the fender line is just above, and that's kind of exactly what I wanted because the hood does bubble up and out a little bit. Like same with the Ranger here, it's pretty close to flush with the top. Can actually go a little bit higher because of the concave in the hood. So like if you look at the hood here, I got probably another, I don't know, 3 inches of clearance there. So safe on the clearance. I could probably go a little bit higher if I needed. The concern right now is the oil pan on the bottom because it has this little deeper section here. So frontal clear, back section's good. This spot here is about 4 inches, and that just might clip the K-member a little bit. So that's kind of what I'm messing with. So that measurement there, it's hard to see, but that one's at 4.5, but the engine is tilted a little bit because of how the chains are, and then this side is at about 3.5. So if I level it out and bring 1/2 inch down this side, 1/2 inch up this side, it should be right at 4 inches, which is pretty close to where that part of the sump is. And believe it or not, I actually have a little bit of wiggle room with the tail shaft, so I'll lift up on the transmission a little bit. You can see it lift up. So I do actually have a little bit of room right now inside the tunnel, which is kind of amazing because it wasn't like that before. Now I'll show you underneath. So coming in from the backside here, check that out. There's actually space all the way around. Like I said, I had a little bit of wiggle room to lift it up. The tail shaft is actually in a decent spot in the tunnel. I don't want to go up too high because there's other junk like this inside the tunnel. So I actually feel like this is ending up in a pretty decent spot. I'm not hitting around anything on that side. I am actually able to move it back and forth a little bit so I can find a happy place in the middle. The shifter position is a little bit off to the right, passenger side, but everything is angled, as mentioned before. So I would say this angle here is a straight shot back from where the pinion is. So it actually looks like it might work. I'll probably have to hog some of that out, widen it out a little bit for good measure, but I think we're getting close. So the driveline is also 2 inches over towards the passenger side, which is pretty typical. So if I look at center there to where the crank bolt is, it's about 2 inches. It's about 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 over. I did measure it. So I'm probably going to put a 4 to 8/8 in it, which is also about 2 inches over to the passenger side, which will align with the tunnel and engine position, and then it does leave me a whole big old wad of room over here for an intake. So I think that's borderline basically where the position's going to go. I just want to make sure that I can, you know, get it level. I'm going to pull the engine out now, and then I'm going to do a little more massaging in the tunnel just for good measure. But I'm feeling like we're in a good spot. Alright, so I'm starting to get some material in for doing the mounts and the K-member spacing. So I do have the K-member drop down right now. And this was the old spacer that I just quickly made and put in there. Right now I'm going to make a template for where the pin is and where the bolt holes are. So I also picked up these 2x2 solid aluminum chunks. And this one here I'm going to use for spacing the sway bar. Cut that in half, and then I'll leave 4 inches for each one. And then this one's at 15 right now. I think I only need 6 inches for each one to make the spacer. But what I want to do is have a piece and then have a spot for that little dowel in there and run the bolt holes through this piece also. So I did end up picking up some longer bolts to compensate for that spacing. So these are M12 by 1.75, 180 millimeter long bolts, and I'm going to do 2-inch spacing, and we'll go from there. Alrighty, here is the wizardry. See, I did use the lathe to kind of make a little bit of a dowel, and then these are pressed into here. So hopefully these will be pretty darn close. I did open these up to 9/16. These are like 12 millimeter bolts. So a little bit of wiggle room. Hopefully the bolt position is accurate in relation to the bottom. I did open up the bottom pin. That's 3/4 of an inch. Opened it up a little bit. This one I'm going to have to open up a little more, I'm sure. We'll see how they fit with this position in relation to the bolt. If not, I might open the bolt hole up a little bit so the dowel position is the same. Either way, they should be pretty decent and not flying around in there. So now I'll try to install one. Well guys, it actually worked. It was a little tough to get everything aligned, but it actually worked just as planned. So not too bad. I'll try to fit the other side. This side does have a little bit of a pinch weld that comes down a little bit farther in than this side, so I might have to do something with that. And I do have some PV blaster on the steering shaft right now because that's what's kind of limiting me from dropping this down farther. Yeah, that actually worked pretty good, I think. Okay, I got both blocks in. Looking pretty good. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a 2-inch spacer right down here also for the sway bar. So that's what the other block is for. So that stuff will all be spaced down. I still got to figure out how I'm going to do the rear section yet, but I'm not too worried about that right now just for mounting the engine. I did order some material to build the engine mounts, and that's not going to be here till Monday. So I think that's as far as I'm going to get in this video. It's kind of late today and I work tomorrow. So I'll get this video up and And how about our goal for the next video is going to be to get the engine mounted in there. And it worked out pretty good considering it was just a little temp plate. Get it?